This is just a cereal rye planted as a cover crop. And in this organic system, we're actually going to use a crimper roller to lay it down and use as a biomass mulch as an alternative to herbicides for weed suppression. This was planted after potatoes, and it was planted with a conventional drill, 6-inch centers, 6-inch row spacing, and about a bushel and a half or 90 pounds per acre. What we were waiting for this is going into pinto beans. What we were waiting for was the stage of anthesis, and that's anthesis in cereal rye is when it's actively dropping pollen. At that point, you can use a crimper roller and effectively get complete termination on this. You don't have to worry about rogue kernel development or volunteer pressure from the cereal rye as the beans are maturing. We did a clipped plot, clip and weigh plot in this, and it looks like we have about 51,000 pounds per acre of clipped biomass. And also came up with a stem count of about 2.5 million stems per acre. So it tillered really well. Average height through here is about 70 inches, but this is a little bit of a knob, so it's not quite as tall here. Yeah, so this is about the average field height. And I believe we're 18 acres here. So let's see if we can look at one of these heads. And you can see in this head, we actually have some anthers exposed, and that's actually what houses the pollen. And so the fact that the anthers, and hence the term anthesis, is these anthers are releasing, that means that we have reached anthesis, and this crop is able to be terminated with the crimper roller.
Yeah.
Timing is key. So what we're hoping to do here is crimp the rye and break the vascular portions of the plant where the plant can communicate with the soil and the seed head. We want to kill the plant so that it stops filling its seed head. So I just plucked this plant out, and you can see that it's been crimped in 2 places, right here and right there. Hopefully that's enough. We'll find out soon. So this half of this pivot was planted to potatoes last year, and harvest was a little bit delayed. These were fresh packed potatoes, but it still came off early enough to get this rye in the ground after we leveled the field back up. And that was really important. We spent a lot of conscious effort smoothing out the bumps after potato harvest, breaking up the compacted roads from the trucks and so forth, so that we had a very firm, very level surface, because without that level, firm surface, this crimping won't really work. The crimper will bounce. There'll be holes and pockets where plants aren't crimped well because they don't have compression from below against the roller blades. So this rye was planted on September 28th following potato harvest, and most of this growth has happened this spring. It came up in the fall before winter, but it was really just, yay high, and pretty much everything you see has happened this spring. And this is a pretty short area in the field. Most of the field really is neck high or better on me. So this is a 15.5-foot roller crimper that we had built by Ron Reed Welding and Gooding. Ron Reed did a great job as far as we're concerned. They produced this roller according to the Rodale Institute specifications. Rodale has developed this crimper design based on a lot of trial and error, and has plans for this roller available online for free. So we just downloaded the plans, gave them to Ron and his son, and they came over and talked with us, looked at the tractor, and 8 days later we had a roller. So we were really impressed, really pleased, because the rye was getting more mature. We weren't sure exactly what we were going to do, but so far so good with the roller. You can see the back of the tractor is just covered with pollen, because as the roller goes, it's really matting down the rye. Any pollen that's in the rye gets kicked up, and you can start to see these, where the crimping has happened, you see these, the roller's looking a little green here where the leaves have been smashed, and that's a good thing. We want to crimp the rye and break the stems. This roller design has the option for water fill. Dry weight is about, I think, 3,200 pounds, but we can add water to increase that by some amount, I can't quite recall, to another 1,200 pounds.
Any water, or is it empty?
Today we're running dry, no water added today. So this is a pretty standard issue John Deere 1590 no-till drill. Nothing fancy about it. One seed box. It's full of pinto beans right now. The seed is metered out with a standard flutes, just like a grain drill. The seed comes down here in the tube, and it enters the ground in a seed boot, which is behind this disc, which we can see better on the other side. But these discs are oriented about 7.5 or 7 degrees to the direction of travel. It opens up a slot and the seed falls down into it. The gauge wheel keeps the depth consistent and also serves to clean off the blade, if the disc if needed. This little press wheel helps to push the seed down in the slot, and then there's a closing wheel here at an angle that pushes pressure against the side of the slot and firms up the slot. But we've replaced the standard seed tab with these Bonilla seed tabs made by Needham Ag. And that's a key thing, because as your seed boot wears out, you get a little escaping here, and the standard seed tabs are just often not sufficient to actually keep the seed in the slot. And these aftermarket jobbers are really handy. We're really impressed with how they're getting the seed, keeping it in the slot. Simple thing, costs a couple bucks a piece. Makes a big difference. So we're going to harvest these beans by swathing them. So we're intentionally planting a stand-up variety of Pinot called Palomino that we've planted. This is the second year we've planted it. So we're really compounding new things for us. We're doing no-till here, we're doing broadcast seeding, we're doing a seed inoculant, and we're doing a variety we've only grown for 1 year. So this will be a great learning experience, a real multi-factor analysis. Some of our main motivators for doing this are obvious just a few yards over there, where we have a sort of conventional tillage approach where we grew a cover crop over the winter and we mowed that cover crop. We've disked it twice with a high-speed disc, and tomorrow that ground will be bedded and planted to beans. Same variety that we're planting here in this rolled rye. So the advantages, the perceived advantages that we think about on this rye, on paper at least, are a lot less disturbance to the soil, better weed control, hopefully. This rye mat is quite thick, and we're hoping that it's going to control some of our problem weeds, suppress their germination until the beans can get up and then canopy and further suppress any weeds. But selfishly, beyond the soil health benefits that might be there, I'm just really excited about not spending time in the tractor cultivating. On our farm, like it or not, our typical tillage program to grow dry beans, either seed or edible, can be between 12 and 15 soil disturbing passes. Between getting ground ready to plant, bedding, planting, cultivating once or 3 times, maybe up to 3 times, cutting if we cut with knives or a rod weeder, and that's just entirely too much. It's too much time in the tractor. I'd rather be home with the kids or fishing with the kids. So that's a main motivator for me. But obviously, every time we turn the soil, some of it blows away. We break down soil structure, we influence the biology in negative ways. So we want to reduce those 12 to 15 passes to a couple passes because, to be honest, this is not no-till per se, because we did a lot of tillage to prepare for this. When this came out of potatoes, we took several trips across this with some heavy-duty tillage to get it back into a level surface and a fairly compact, uniform seed bed till we plant the rye. But the advantage is that over the winter, this ground had rye growing in it, and it had a little bit of rye from November on to capture sunlight, put carbon in the ground, hopefully stimulate and keep the biology living as much as possible through the winter, but hold the ground. We didn't have to do a bunch of spring tillage and a windy, dry spring that we've experienced. This rye's just been growing away happily. We have had to water it. We've watered it several times to keep it going and get it to the height that it is today. Following potatoes, we spread compost here, composted dairy manure or aged stack manure. But we do not plan to add any other fertility amendments aside from the seed treatment, the biological stimulants, and a biological inoculant that's on the seed itself. So we planted these Pinot beans 28 days ago, the last time we were here, getting filmed. And you can see we killed some rye, and some rye came back. We've had a lot of suckering from the actual crown of the rye itself. We don't yet know if that's enough suckering to cause trouble at harvest or really outcompete and cause an issue with the beans. We'll find out. But we did experience a cool down in temperatures after we planted, and we attribute that to why we're not seeing as many beans here on the surface. That cool down and several other factors. We knew initially we weren't planting the beans deep enough, so we started planting them deeper by the time we got to this side of the field, and that may have been too deep in the end. But we were having trouble getting the beans in the ground through this very thick rye mat, an inch and a half, somewhat variable thickness. So we just ratcheted the drill down so that we made sure we got good seed to soil contact, and that may have been a factor. That we just planted too deep in the end. Too deep for the bean to get out of the ground and then encounter this thick rye mat and push through the rye mat to actually get to some sunlight. Another factor that we remedied was we did end up taking the seed tabs off the planter boots, the seed boots themselves, because we were afraid we were starting to crack beans. With all that down pressure trying to get the seed boot in the ground, that seed tab was really pushing hard down on the ground, and we thought we were cracking beans, so we ended up taking those off. I'm not quite sure if that may have been an issue or not, but trying to be, it's better safe than sorry. This ground initially wasn't probably wet enough to bring the beans, so 3 days or 4 days after we planted, we decided to actually water this. We turned the pivot on, and that may have contributed to the rye suckering and coming back, not fully dying after being rolled. Another point that someone made is, well, maybe you have just so much rye that you're not able to actually crimp it completely and kill it effectively because you just have such a thick rye mat that your crimper is not working. After we planted that day and rolled and planted that day, we came back 3 days later and rolled again because we found that some rye had started to come back up. So another factor may be both the original planting width of the rye and the direction the rye is rolled. So for planting width, this field was planted on 6-inch centers. The rye was planted at 6 inches apart with a regular grain drill. Our other test field we planted with the no-till grain drill, which has 7.5 inches apart. Each planted unit is 7.5 inches. So when we roll that field, we see more space between the rye, except where we roll the rye 90 degrees to the direction the rye was planted, like on the ends. And we think we have better rye matting and better weed control where we've rolled the rye up across the grain that it was planted, or orthogonal or even perpendicular to the direction the rye was planted.
With the wider rye spacing.
With the wider rye spacing. Here in this field, where we have narrow rye spacing, it doesn't seem to matter as much. But the 1.5 inch difference in rye spacing is visually apparent after rolling. But I think the big factor that's really impacting this, or the easiest factor to point to, is really cool ground conditions with just protracted cold temperatures. I mean, you can see right now that we're here at 60 degrees or so at 3 or so inches depth, and that's just mighty chilly, even though it's plenty warm out here. So this season, we're uncomfortable with the stand we have. We don't think we have enough beans to go forward. We're planning to replant in the next few days. As I say just a moment ago, we watered this pretty heavy 48 hours ago to try to build up some soil moisture. When things warm up in the next few days, we'll try to plant again and see what comes of it. What we think we'll do next time is we'll plant rye and grow it over the winter, but we won't baby it as much in the spring. We're not going to water as much. We're going to try and grow enough rye, but not too much rye. And then we're going to roll it and kill it at its optimum vulnerability when it's shedding pollen. And we're going to let it die. We're not going to water it. We're just going to let it dry up and die, hopefully. And then 2-3 weeks later, maybe give this a really good deep watering to get some good moisture in the soil profile. And at that time, plant beans. So that may result in us planting beans later, and we'll need a shorter season bean. But we really think we have to wait till soil temperatures are better germination conditions, warmer and more consistent heat through the day and the night. So we might have warm days, but if we have really cool nights like we had this spring, we're probably not going to get to the right conditions we need. So we may also change tactics a little bit and use a planter instead of a broadcast grain drills type planter. We may go to a situation where we put beans back in rows and then we'll be able to have less less competition for weeds, maybe, because we'll be opening up less rye with fewer openers, fewer planter units. And we definitely want to suppress the weeds as much as we can. And you certainly don't see any coming here, hardly. But in other places where the planter units did open up the rye, we do have strips of bare ground where we're observing these small weeds coming, and we certainly want to avoid that if we can. We've definitely learned a lot here, as is common with these these sorts of situations. And I'd like to pose to you who are watching what you think we could do different, and let us know. Obviously, we're learning a lot here. We've done a lot of these different pieces, but this is the first time we've put everything together in one field. And we thought we knew what we were doing, but that's always dangerous, and we'll be happy to have your feedback on what you think would be more effective.